within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I wanted to share some thoughts about friendship, and as usual I'll probably wander all over the place subject-wise, but the one that comes to my mind the most, which will lead to a song I share later in the show. Well, to back up before I get to that one, I guess. Growing up through grade school, middle school, high school, I never really had any close friends. And so it was kind of this question of who to hang around with, I guess. And when you're sitting by yourself in the lunchroom, who do you wind up sitting with? I always seemed to look for the person who was being left out in some way. And very often I wound up making friendships with people with different sorts of disabilities. And I just figured they were people. I didn't see any need to be patronizing toward them or to treat them any differently. And if I had a question, I'd ask it. And maybe they could answer, maybe they couldn't, and I'd respond in whatever supportive, constructive way I could. But to me it was important in whatever event I created, to create an event, to create a social space, I guess you could say, within which everyone was welcome. I suppose because of all the times I was excluded, inclusivity has always been very, very important to me. And because the range of types of people that I wound up having for friends at various times in my life was so broad, in terms of races, religions, ethnicities, genders, everything, socioeconomic groupings. I've just had a very, very wide spectrum of types of people that I've had as friends. But it bothered me at one point in the early 90s when I lived somewhere that essentially there was no wheelchair accessible route to get into the house. And so there were some friends I'd made at the time, one of whom was a man who would be described as being quadriplegic, meaning that he had been in a motorcycle accident and all four of his limbs had been negatively affected. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair and had a certain amount of mobility in his arms, but not full mobility, and in his arms and hands. And yet he was an extremely intelligent man to talk with, a very good friend, and he just had different sorts of physical needs because of the results of his motorcycle accident. And because of, I'm not a medical professional, but from what I've been told, if I understand correctly, because of sitting in a chair for basically the rest of their lives, people who are described as quadriplegic or paraplegic, which would be just two, usually the legs, it puts a different sort of pressure on the spine. And so at some point it's to be expected that the spine will need some help. And there was a particular point where he and his wife were trying to deal with the fact that he would need reconstructive surgery for his spine because it was deteriorating and things were compacting and it needed to be operated on. And it was such a major surgery to reconstruct the spine because there's so many nerves and everything that goes through the spine. It's just one of the most sensitive areas of our body in terms of maintaining overall functionality. And so he was very worried about it. And they decided that they wanted to create a ritual to help him mentally and emotionally, and I suppose spiritually also, prepare for going through this very difficult operation. And decided that the most appropriate person to facilitate that ritual would be Sister Who. And I thought I was totally honored. And so just because it worked out that way, we wound up meeting with a bunch of friends at their house on Halloween night, October 31st one year. And in trying to figure out how to address the situation with a constructive, empowering ritual, what I ultimately came up with is to have this cord, and then around it there were multiple other strands that were braided together so that it kind of became almost like a miniature maypole of this braid that went around this central cord. And I said, the central cord is you, I said to my friend. And around it are all of our love, all of our prayers, all of our positive thoughts, all of our good wishes, embracing you and surrounding you, and in whatever way we can, protecting you as you go through this difficult surgery. But I left long enough strands at the bottom so that so that everyone there, and I invited them to tie on whatever symbols of themselves or their prayers or whatever symbolic objects they wanted to attach. And so as we're going around the room and people are adding things, one person added a bunch of jingle bells, a bunch of little bells to symbolize the voices of their cats that they had. They had a number of cats that lived in the house with them. And so that there would be a voice, and that would be like the cats. Somebody, by the time we got done, there was 6 or 7 or 8 different sort of symbolic objects tied to the ends of these braids. And so the whole thing formed kind of a symbolic talisman of himself facing the surgery, our love and prayers around him, symbols of our presence, of our voices, of our hands even supporting him and embracing him. And we made this object, and I kept thinking there should be a song, but I didn't have any song that we could sing together to kind of seal the ritual, so to speak. And but we created the talisman. To jump ahead for just a moment, my understanding is the talisman was put in a plastic bag and sealed so that it could be actually taken into the operating room with him, so that the talisman that we created, that we put our energy into in a sense, that was with him throughout the surgery. Well, the surgery went so well that what was supposed to be 2 different surgeries performed on 2 different days was combined into a single surgery that took about 1.5 times what the first surgery took. So it was the time was shortened by 25%, and 2 surgeries were combined into one. And the recovery was remarkable in most ways. The doctors were quite impressed, and I suppose on one hand we could say, see, our prayers worked. I don't know that it's so much about whether the prayer worked or not, or what the effect was, but it was very reassuring that having put our love and our prayers into it, there was a good response of sorts. The final note, unfortunately, was that about 8 months, I think, after the surgery, or 8 months after we did the Halloween night ritual, a blood clot entered his brain, and he wound up passing away from that. But the surgery itself had gone remarkably well. But to go back to the time of where he's anxious, understandably facing a difficult surgery, I and his other friends are gathering around him, trying to lend whatever support, encouragement, whatever positive thoughts and prayers we can. And at that time I was living in another state for a year, and the next day I was driving home, and so basically between Denver and Fort Collins on I-25 is where I kept pondering and meditating upon what would we sing, and what prayer would I have wanted to put around that ritual time together. Which a ritual is just a way of illustrating our own beliefs, of taking our spiritual elements, taking creative elements, our imagination, fusing it all together and acting it out in a way that somehow makes it more real, but makes it real on multiple dimensions, not just materially, but also spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. Ritual is a multidimensional, multifaceted kind of thing, and yet so available to our own creativity. We can do rituals for anything we need. But for myself, I think it's always, rituals are always empowered by having music and singing included, if or whenever we can. But so as I'm driving forth between Denver and Fort Collins on Interstate Highway 25, composed this simple little chorus that can actually be sung as a round. Just me here today, so I'll just sing it through for you about 3 times. But the final note on this, I guess, was that when he did pass away, I had the honor of appearing in ritual garb at his memorial service and singing the song for everyone there. May peace and love surround you through all the days ahead, and may the grace that has found you guide every step you tread. May peace and love surround you through all the days ahead, and may the grace that has found you guide every step you tread. May peace and love surround you through all the days ahead, and may the grace that has found you guide every step you tread. My intention in creating the song was that it be one that everyone could sing. People of any particular faith or none. That when we say, may peace and love surround you, that we understand what we mean, that when you're facing a surgery and worry is all too available, that even in the mystery of not knowing how it's going to turn out, of not knowing everything that's involved, of not knowing how many guardian angels may or may not be standing nearby, to find, in spite of all that not knowing, in spite of all that being between, in spite of the abundance of questions and the absence of answers, to find a peace that recognizes that love and wisdom still prevails, and that life is absolutely worth living, and that which is God has not gone away and left us to perish, but that whatever happens, and these are not easy things to say and not easy things to live with, because sometimes people don't come out of surgery, but to accept that whatever happens, to find the good in it, to find the love in it, to find the peace in it, that more often when we describe things as good or bad, it's not that they are good or bad in and of themselves, it's whether they're what we wanted to have happen or not. And I didn't know whether my friend would make it through his surgery or not. But no matter what happened, I wanted him to have peace in the midst of that. That love was real, that every moment of friendship we had together was real, that there was nothing about the events of the current moment that could take any of that away. And to have that, the abiding reality of love and friendship, that could be an anchor point of peace for him even in the midst of those very difficult and uncertain circumstances. That peace in combination with love would provide for him a vehicle to navigate that relationship, kind of like being in a good sturdy canoe as you go through a section of whitewater rapids, that the boat you're in is able to get between the rocks and follow the course of the river wherever it may go, and to trust that somewhere further down the course of the river there really is a calm lake where everything will be externally peaceful again, but that while we're going through the rapids, it's the internal peace that needs more of our attention. And in this song, wanting to totally surround our friend with that sort of deeper, broader, bigger peace and the love of all of his friends, that we have a current moment, and if we're small enough to fit within that moment, and it seems to tower over us and be so big and overwhelming, and yet when we look at the bigger picture of life and the bigger picture of each one of us, that there are so many memories and so many experiences and so much stuff that all adds up to the totality of who each and every one of us is, and that with each moment we live we're adding to it, that each experience expands our mind and our understanding in even more ways. To surround all of ourselves with all of that, especially during times of difficulty. And we don't know how many days are ahead or how few, but to invite that be present in all of them, that there be nothing left out, no day or moment or experience that's overlooked, but to combine all of that into our collective awareness, to be a community for each other in it. And when we speak of the grace that has found you, the grace that has found us, many years ago I was told a basic definition for grace that seems to be relatively reliable and constant, and that's just that grace is unmerited favor. It's what you didn't earn, but because someone loves you, they simply give it to you. Not in an enabling way, but in an empowering way. It's not grace that is given in order to be abused. It's grace that is given in order to empower, in order to put a smile on your face and a spring in your step and determination in your will. That no matter what happens, you will face the obstacle, you will wrestle with it, and you will rise above it. You will rise to the occasion and become more of a person afterwards than you were before, through however many or few days you might have. We didn't know that Paul was within his last year of life, and yet I know that the last weeks and months that he did have were valuable and beautiful months, and that he lived life to the fullest, even being a quadriplegic person in a wheelchair. It seemed to me that the least I could have done was to create this song and to remember him, and I continue to remember him, and I continue to be inspired by his example. And I imagine there may be many people who think that the example of a quadriplegic person may be so riddled with limitations that, what could you possibly be inspired by that? But I'm sure the same could be said of any of us. It's when you know someone enough to know why having them as a friend is worth everything that it might cost you. The old saying goes, you get what you pay for. And so I always have to wonder, if you have a friendship that didn't or doesn't cost you anything, what is it really worth? If you're not investing yourself in the other person, is it truly a friendship of any significant depth? Is it a deep enough relationship to even be called a friendship? In our current age of economic obsession, it seems to me so many people have gotten so hooked on the distractions and the money and the pursuit of money and their workaday lives that I meet lots of people who strike me as being beautiful people, undiscovered treasures, people of amazing potential. And I'm surprised sometimes at how few people want to invest themselves in friendship anymore, and how many have forgotten that humanity is, after all, one big family, and that there is a sense in which we have to all be community for each other. Because you watch the news reporting of any major tragedy that happens, an earthquake, a tornado, a flood, a tidal wave, whatever it is, and for about a week, we remember that the best resource we have is each other. And then people seem to slip back into the same negative societal patterns again, valuing money over people and programs over the individuals involved in them, and trying to create one-size-fits-all answers instead of understanding the uniqueness and the unique needs of each person we meet, each person affected. So the grace that has found you, what I was trying to bring in through that as I wrote this song, thinking of my friend, that it's grace that we didn't earn. It comes to us, it blesses us, and very often we don't even know where it came from. But to me, it seemed important to recognize that there is something beautiful and graceful and spiritual and real that, even when we don't know whether to look for it, is looking for us. And there's a sense in which sometimes people find their lives, and numerous people with whom I've spoken have reflected upon that initial moment when everything clicked, when the opportunities and the resources and everything came together, and said that it was almost more like life found them when we didn't even know what we were looking for. Well, I suppose the prime example being me being Sister Who. I was not looking to become Sister Who. I was looking for a broader understanding of what it means to be gay. I was looking for new friendships. I was looking for new experiences that expand my definition of who and what I am and expand my abilities. And so I became a bodybuilder for, as far as I knew, one particular competition. And by showing up for that experience of my life, totally unexpected, here comes other people from the side, people I never imagined existed, and the conversations that followed opened a door and created a whole new way for me to be that I never would have envisioned. But I sometimes joke with my friends that my life is so without precedent, I have to keep making it up as I go. And I don't know how much I buy into everything I hear about networking, but I definitely believe in synchronicity. But I think it was very much that in showing up for my life, in being willing to try something for which I felt completely unqualified, a bodybuilding competition of all things, that simply in showing up for that, life had the opportunity to find me. The life of being Sister Who sought me out even when I wasn't looking for it. And it kind of brings me back to some sort of belief in destiny, that maybe there's something out there. And maybe there's a lot of things that stand between us and it, but whatever purpose or reason or combination of reasons and purposes, it still comes back to us, each of us, being willing to show up, do what we can, make it as beautiful and wise as possible, and notice anything else that meets us there. My life was changed by meeting my friend who was a quadriplegic. My values have shifted radically. Perhaps there is some way that the mere fact of our wise and loving presence can be perhaps even a healing influence upon those around us. Thank you for watching.